Hello and welcome to a new top 10 video. This time is for Duskmourn. This set, initially I thought it wouldn't be that powerful, although it is a very kind of flavorful set. It's kind of very different, a bit divisive, but I personally kind of like it. But I thought it would be like very, very low power level. But after looking at the cards like in a more, detailed way, I think there are some gems which could actually see playing Timeless. I don't think it's gonna be on the main meta decks, but as a brewer who really likes this kind of very weird and kind of off meta decks, I think there are some gems. So I'm gonna explain the 10 ones that I think have the most potential, and I hope I can also inspire you and maybe help you brew with them too. So let's go. On the 10th position, Drag to the Roots. This is a very straightforward card. It's a very good removal spell if you have Delirium, which I think in Timeless, as you've noticed, is almost trivial lately to get Delirium thanks to Malevolent Rumble and all the enablers. So I think this card as a 2-mana destroy anything, kind of like Abrupt Decay, but for any permanent, although it can be countered, it's really, really good. So I think in the decks that play these colors, which aren't that many, but there are some, I think it could be like a very, very good card in the main deck, maybe as a 1-off or 2-off, and of course maybe in the sideboard. So good card overall. On the 9th position, Valgavoth Terror Eater. This is the big baddie from Duskmourn, and obviously this card is not playable as a if you pay its mana cost, but it is very, very playable as a reanimation target, and I think this is the way that it will see play. It's just a big baddie. It has nothing like super interesting about it, but I think as a probably one-off on the Reanimator decks, I think Atraxa is still a bit better, as a 3 or 4 off, because it's less life to pay when you are remating it, and Atraxa gives you a lot of cards immediately. But I think as a one-off, maybe Tutor instead of Griselbrand, this card is very, very powerful. It's extremely hard to remove because you have to have 3 non-land permanents. It can gain you life too, and then you can essentially go off if you untap with it, and also in the same turn, probably if you use Grief, you can actually pay life to cast the card that you have discarded with Grief with its ability. So it's just a very big body. Will never be cast like in a normal way, I think, but it will be reanimated and you will probably die to it a lot of times. On the 8th position, a card which I think it's kind of a risky pick, but I think it has a lot of potential, and it's called Patchwork Beastie. This is essentially a 1-mana 3/3, which is very good stats, kind of wild Nakatl, but of course the catch is that you have to have Delirium for it to attack or block. But then it also has like a kind of a good ability in which you can mill cards at the beginning of your upkeep, which is very relevant obviously in a Delirium deck, and in general milling is usually very good. So I think this card is, again, I think enabling Delirium is very, very easy in Timeless. So I think essentially most of the time in a dedicated deck, which I think could be something like the old Canadian Thrice-Called, like a Rag Tempo deck, or maybe a Sultai one, something like, you get Delirium turn 2 most of the time. I think it's a very good threat. You just pay 1 mana, you have a 3/3 which has an extra ability, and you just kill your opponent like the old Dever or Secrets, but I think it's a bit better even. The fact that it's also an artifact itself, it helps with the Delirium theme. So I think it has some potential. Every 1-mana threat which has such a good stat line, I think you have to look at it twice. And again, it's gonna be very fringe. You don't play this in any, unless it's a very, very specific Delirium deck. But I think in this kind of deck, it could see play, and I like it. It's a fun card. On the 7th position, a card that is like very, very old, and honestly I've never played with it, and I think many people haven't because it hasn't just been reprinted until now, I think. So it's kind of a cool effect. It's called Sacrifice. You sack a creature and you produce black mana equal to its mana value. So at first glance this card doesn't seem that good, but you have to look at the fact that it is actually an instant. So obviously what I see here is essentially using, you know, evoking an elemental. For example, Grief is the most obvious one, but also Fury and even Solitude. And then you sacrifice it, and then you get 5 black mana, like turn 1. Like, it is pretty busted. Like, Dark Ritual, we all know how good it is, and I think Dark Ritual is obviously better than this. But in a deck that wants to have maybe 8 Dark Rituals, or more than 4, and just turn 1 5 mana with an elemental, which again is not difficult to have, I think this card has some potential to be broken. You have to build your deck like really in a very specific manner, but I think people are sleeping on this card. So yeah, I'm excited to brew with it, with all the, you know, I've also thought of, you know, if we had Sign of Draco in Timeless, you know, that is a 12 mana artifact that you can actually play on turn 2 because it needs a domain. You could sack the Draco and have 2 mana, so I'm not sure, I haven't looked if in Timeless there's kind of these very high mana value creatures which you can sack, maybe some Delve ones, but I think it's gonna be a fun card to play with, and it has some high potential for sure. On the 6th position, a card that it's another very risky pick, but I've thought about it and I think it could be very good. So essentially this card, it's just a 2 mana 3/1, so pretty terrible stat line. It dies to Bowmasters, but it has a very interesting ability in which if it's tapped, it's an Entomb. Like, it's literally an Entomb, and we know how good Entomb is, if, for example, in Legacy, in a format with Grief and with Attracts, and especially with Reanimate, obviously. Without Reanimate, this card wouldn't ever see play, so I don't know if it will be viable, but I envision a deck with maybe Springleaf Drum, or maybe even some kind of vehicles, because it's very important that you play this and immediately tap it, so you get the Entomb ability, and preferentially also at a point where the opponent doesn't have open mana, so he cannot Bowmasters you, because that would be like really bad. So it's kind of I don't know, kind of hit or miss. I'm not sure if this will see play, but an Entomb is very, very good. If you can actually turn to play this Entomb Attracts and just tutor it, and then kind of reanimate it, or even on the same turn with that ritual, I think it's pretty busted, because one of the problems that the current Esper Reanimator deck has is that sometimes it doesn't find the Reanimator target. Sometimes you just draw cards and you find your Reanimates and you don't find your creatures. So I think it may see play, but you really have to change the kind of the Reanimator deck. So let's see. Cracking the top 5, Pyroclasm. I don't think I have to say anything about this card. Like, 2 damage, very, very good. I think this card will see play in every sideboard or in Timeless until the end of time, because it's just the best red wipe against kind of aggro decks anytime. So excellent addition to Timeless. It will see a lot of play. Nothing else to say. On the 4th position, Abhorrent Oculus. This is a very, very cool card. I love this kind of card because, like, my favorite kind of deck is blue tempo. So people are comparing this to Murktide. I don't think it's that good. 3 mana is a lot more than 2 mana, but I think it could be like a Murktide at home, maybe. Like, it's pretty good. So you cast this spell, you have to exile 3 cards from your graveyard, which is quite a lot, but your deck will be like really, really optimized to do that. And then the good thing, it's a 5/5 beater, which also flies. And then it has this ability in which you create 2/2s and you also kind of surveil. It's a very good ability, Manifest Dread. So if it gets, going, it is a very, very powerful card. If you can protect it, it keeps creating 2/2s. It's a very good body. I think it could be good. I'm still hesitant that tapping 3 mana in Timeless like this is good enough, but I think it's worth a shot, so I'll definitely try it in all my kind of tempo decks that I have thought about. It's also worth mentioning that this card can be unearthed, and also with that the white card that also unearths. So I think you could play this also in this kind of deck which essentially tries to reanimate it and doesn't pay the kind of the 6 card exiling cost. Maybe also with Catonian Nightmare, since the the 3 mana, you know, the actual cost is so low and the body is so good and the ability too. I think it may see play in this kind of more reanimator decks, but not like full on reanimator, you know what I mean, like small dudes. So we'll see. Kind of exciting card, and we'll try and brew with it. Cracking the top 3, Say Its Name, and the Altanak, the Thrice-Called. So this is a very kind of interesting design, honestly. So this card essentially is just a pay 2 mana, you mill 3, and it's kind of a regrowth, which by itself is not that bad. It's not amazing, but it is a decent effect. But then you have this kind of thing here where if you exiled 3 of these cards from your graveyard, you can search for the Altanak, which is a big dude. It's a 9/9 with trample, which also kind of cantrips if they try and kill it, and you can get it into play for free, even if it's if the Altanak is on the graveyard or if it's in your library. You can just tutor it and put it into play. So I think it is very powerful. I think seriously this card, I think it will see a lot of play in Timeless, because it's very easy to put this package in many decks. I think I will try it first in like the actual, like the Dredge deck, which you auto mill yourself, and I think it should be quite easy to get these like 3 say your names, maybe turn 2 or turn 3, and then get the big dude, which could be like a plan B if you don't find enough priced amalgams or narcomoebas. So I'll play it in that deck first, but then I also think this kind of fits in more of like fair decks. You know, you can play this deck in this kind of Sultai shell with Malevolent Rumble and this, and then you just play your game. Yeah, you know, you play your creatures and then you counter spells, or maybe you Thoughtseize, and then suddenly you have these 3 cards and you don't spend any mana, you just exile them, and then have a 9/9, which is very kind of difficult to kill, you know. Okay, Swords to Plowshares kills it, and then the Leyland Binding, but it's not easy, and you also get a card for your travels, and this is essentially for free, you know what I mean. So I think it's a very good card, and I think it will see play, and I'll try to find the best shell for it as soon as I can. So let's see. On the top 2, Demonic Counsel. I've already said many times that I think getting Delirium in Timeless is quite trivial nowadays. And essentially this card, if you have Delirium, is just straight up Demonic Tutor. There's a reason Demonic Tutor is it's restricted in Timeless. It's a very powerful card. You can get any card in your deck, so for combo decks it's insane. And being able to have essentially 5 Demonic Tutors in your deck, if you construct your deck correctly and you get Delirium easily, I think it's pretty busted. There aren't that many decks that can get Delirium and actually like want to spend 2 mana to get a card, because I don't think you play this kind of card in, you know, in mid-range decks or tempo decks. You play mostly combo-oriented decks, but I think there's one deck in particular which really wants this, which is the old Rakdos Bridge deck. This deck struggles with finding all the kind of pieces like Underworld Bridge, Dark Ritual, or the Supplier, and this card kind of fixes everything, because it also works very well in the shell, which also plays like the Dragon's Rage Channeler and the Bubble, so it gets Delirium really easily. And yeah, I think this card will get you whatever you need at that moment very easily, and I think it could actually revive that archetype. It may also see play in some, I don't know if Show and Tell, you know, it's not that easy to get Delirium in that deck, but I think this is a very powerful card. And I think you also may see some play in the Reanimator decks as a 1 or 2 of, because it can be a Demonic Tutor, but even if you don't have Delirium, you can get your Griselbrand or your Valgavoth, or however that the big dude is called, and you just get it and then reanimate it. So I think good card, and a very high power level and potential for sure. And on the first position, Fear of Missing Out, FOMO. I think Wizard is kind of trolling us with all the sets and all the FOMO. But yeah, this card is like super pushed, and I really love it. My favorite card in the set, I think. Really cool design. So this card is 2 mana, 2/3, already pretty decent stats. When it comes into play, you discard a card and then you draw a card. Also a good effect, and helps with Delirium, which comes into play later. And then it's also an enchantment creature, which is relevant again for Delirium. So what is the kind of big ability of this creature? When it has Delirium, you untap another creature and then you get another extra attack phase. It's pretty busted. Until now, like the creatures that get you another attack phase, they're usually like 5 mana, 6 mana, because it's a kind of a powerful effect. And the fact that this is just costs 2 mana and actually untaps a creature, I think, man, this card I think is gonna see a lot of play and be very influential in Timeless. I think the decks that you may see this is probably, it may spawn kind of this Hollow One deck, which you may attack for like 20 on turn 3, like with this card. And I think it works very, very well with haste enablers. And this is Detective Phoenix. I think Detective Phoenix and FOMO will be best friends until the end of time. And also Arena of Glory is very, very good, because if you just play it and don't attack, okay, then, you know, they probably kill your Fear of Missing Out, which is still fine, you know, you get your effect and it's an enchantment in your yard. But I think with haste, you can do such busted things that it will really push the kind of, I think, more aggressive decks to the top of the meta. This card is also kind of good with Vigilance creatures, which there aren't many good Vigilance creatures in Timeless, but there's one in particular which I think may see play together. I'll definitely have some ideas already, which is Kitsa. Kitsa is a powerful card which has a lot of effects, and the fact that you can attack and not tap it, and then attack again with it can go really big with the prowess, and I think there could be something there. And of course you can even use its ability like 2 times if you untap with it with FOMO. So yeah, very, very good card. I think lots of potential, many different ways to go with this Nightmare, and we'll definitely try all of them. Yeah, so excited. So I hope you enjoyed this top 10. We'll definitely be brewing with all of these. Already have some decks lined up, so be tuned for the next weeks and see you on the next one.